Hearty shalom to you, Jeffrey Seif here. Taking a look at the book, Acts chapter 25. I want to work through 1 through 8. A really interesting story here, and something in it that really speaks to for and about the essence and substance of Messianic Jewish experience and theology. We're in the middle of political intrigue, trying times literally for Paul, who had been arrested, taken down to Caesarea Maritime. He's languished there under one personality, and now a new governor, Festus. He is going to be deciding the situation. There's been a change of the guard politically, and we're told here in chapter 25 that this Festus leaves Caesarea Maritime by the sea, and he goes to Jerusalem, and in verses 1 and 2, it says he goes there and he meets with what we refer to in the TLV as the ruling Kohanim and the leading Judeans. The priests and the Jews, people think that the whole Jewish population was bent out of shape and predisposed to want to do away with Jesus. Well, that's really not true. It's leadership principally. And I like the way we forever want to underscore that. The normal telling is that all the Jews were against Jesus, thus Jesus was against all the Jews later. That's says more about the creative imaginations of those jaded theologians than it does what we really see in the literature. Well, we're told here that Festus goes to Jerusalem, and you do have these gnarly elites that are hell-bent on destroying Jesus. It says as much explicitly. They want to get Jesus up to Jerusalem so they can seize him, and they want to get Paul, rather, up to Jerusalem so they can seize him and kill him. I mean, it's explicit in verse 3. There's no other way to understand it. He says, Luke does, that they were planning to ambush and kill him on the road as he goes there. And I would imagine, by the way, that the only way that Luke could know there was a plot against Paul is that some of the conspirators in it wound up repenting of it and becoming a follower of the way. Thus the story can trickle down. Hey, Luke, you know that, by the way, once upon a time we were going to do such and such. Even individuals that are angered and predisposed toward wrath can become converted. People say, Seif, how long have you been a converted Jew? I say, I'm not a converted Jew, I'm a converted sinner. It's not a sin to be a Jew. There is some kind of conversion that takes place, some kind of transformation. And I would only guess that those transformed individuals would pass on the information of this plot at the moment. Now, what I want to do is just get to the place here where in verse 6, after spending some time in Jerusalem, then the governor Festus is going to make his way to Caesarea again, Caesarea Maritime by the sea. And Paul's going to be brought in. We're told in verse 6 that he's going to sit on the judgment seat. In verse 7, then that the Judean leaders had come down. And then in verse 8, Paul gets to speak. And it's in what Paul says in his own defense that I want to alight upon here. There's a nugget of gold here that I think is important. When Paul speaks in his own voice, according to his biographer Luke, he is there before Festus. There are Judean leaders that are there bringing accusations against him. And Paul said in his defense, I have committed no offense against the Torah of the Jewish people or against the temple or against Caesar, end of quote. I just want to camp there for a second. Paul was accused of, initially, the genesis of this riotous situation that resulted in him getting arrested and then spirited away from Jerusalem proper down to Caesarea, where he's been languishing. The origin of this was that Paul was in the temple making sacrifices, and it was alleged by some that he had brought someone who was non-Jewish into an area of the temple complex that's reserved for Hebrews only. And this was, this was the problem. Ostensibly, truth be known, there were tensions and energies and hatred of Paul that was welling up, and so this trumped-up charge is employed, and it takes a life of its own. Paul says, listen, I've committed no offense against the Torah of the Jewish people or against the temple. That is to say, he didn't violate the regulations for the temple precincts. He says, I've not done anything against Caesar. Now, here's what I want to alight upon. Christianity today, in so many ways, does represent itself as an offense against the Torah of the Jewish people and against the temple. That is to say that Christianity is often propped up as triumphant over Torah and over temple, that is, over Jewish cultural and religious experience. You know, that's the way it's construed. That, you know, the church has the new book and the Jews have the Jew book, the Old Testament. And I'm more predisposed to see the Old Testament as the arm and the New Testament as the hand, and together are telling the story of God reaching down to humankind. But in so many ways, Christianity props itself as being superior to, over and against, in so many ways, Torah experience and Jewish experience. And Messianic Jewish experience, Jews who've accepted Jesus, understand the Jesus story to be a fulfillment of Jewish experience, and individuals still want to live within it rather than jettison it entirely, as is what's often assumed to be the norm for Christian experience. If you do that, that is to say, if you jettison the Torah and Jewish cultural experience and stand against it, you can't speak like this. I don't think that Christian leaders on trial today could stand up and say, I've committed no offense against the Torah of the Jewish people or against the temple. They could say that I have not committed offense against Caesar. That is to say, I'm living within the confines of civil law, criminal law. Individuals can do that. But relative to living within the parameters of Torah standard in living, most could not stand up and say, you know, I have not committed an offense. Now, to me, it's striking. The founder of Christianity, so-called, I mean, Jesus arguably is the founder, but in terms of institutionalize the movement, the one who articulates the essence and substance of what it means to be Christian, in so many ways, let's face it, Paul has left an indelible imprint on biblical literature. That person stands up and represents himself as living in a way that is responsible to, answerable to, within the parameters of Jewish experience. And, you know, today you can drive down the street, the St. Paul Methodist Church, St. Paul Baptist Church, St. Paul Lutheran Church, St. Paul Catholic Church, but none of them really stand with St. Paul. not on this score anyway. And again, I'm not really trying to cast aspersions on any of that, as much as to say that Paul himself understands himself to be living within the Jewish world. And individuals like me, I know it's very confusing to some, that we can be confusing. Religion can be confusing, I know. But some of us want to live closer to Jewish experience and make our case to our Jewish friends. I like to say that my ministry in life, principally, I want to help Jewish people come to know Jesus, and I want to help Jesus people come to know Jews. And in that regard, I plant my feet a little closer to Jewish soil and sentiment than the average theologian necessarily. Because for me, my message to Jewish people isn't jettison Jewish experience. My message to Jewish people is take a look at Jesus. And it's my message to Christian people as well. Take a look at Jesus from a Jewish perspective. Well, there's more I can say about this, and I'll do it again next week. Thanks for bearing with me for 9 minutes this week. God bless.